as Jenny mentioned, I'm one of the co-chairs of the Data Access Protection and Confidentiality, or DAPC working group. And I'm here to present on behalf of our other co-chairs and working group members, including Christy Lee, who I see is on the call, and Matt Wright, who helps to co-chair DAPC as well. And really today, what I'll be talking a little bit about is our statement on expectations for member data sharing. Sorry about that. In case you are not aware, the mission of the DAPC working group is to manage data policy frameworks for ClinGen that respond to the needs of an evolving curation ecosystem. And we are a multidisciplinary team that includes individuals with expertise in curation, data sharing policies, ethical and legal frameworks, software development, clinical genetics practice, and even patient advocacy. Our statement on expectations for member data sharing is now live on the ClinGen site. I'll drop the URL in the chat in case you want to take a look at the final document in more detail. But in the past, questions have arisen regarding if all ClinGen working group and expert panel members should be required to engage in data sharing. I think we all know that open and transparent data sharing is really important. It allows for peer review, it informs our curation efforts, and ultimately helps inform patient care. And it's really central to the work that we're doing. We acknowledge in our statement that data sharing can take many forms, from sharing with curation groups to depositing data in publicly available databases like ClinVar. But with nearly 1,900 working group and expert panel members, ClinGen can't monitor and track data sharing practices among all of the people who are volunteering and working with our groups. It's just not feasible for us to track long term. This is outlined in that statement on expectations for member data sharing, and the statement goes on to outline that the groups are open to all interested members, including those that engage in data sharing, those that might not be actively sharing data, and those that don't have data to share. It's also open to those that might not have control over data sharing at their institution. They might not be a decision maker, say, around ClinVar data submissions. With that said, given the importance of data sharing, it's important that the expert panel and working group chairs create an environment within that group that includes productive data sharing and curation. The policy outlines that if a ClinGen group member's data sharing practices or lack of data sharing is impacting the group's function, collegiality, or productivity, there is a pathway to raise concerns moving forward. So there's no requirement to share data. The group is open to all kinds of individuals who might want to engage. But if there are concerns, if data sharing practices are impacting things, we want you to be aware of how to move that forward. As I said, this is outlined in the policy itself, but wanted to walk through it today with you. Those who wish to raise concerns about a member's data sharing should reach out to the DAPC working group co-chairs at our email listed here. It's listed in the policy as well. That will go to Christy, Matt, and myself. And then from there, we might work with the individual that raised the concern or other group members to really gather more information on the data sharing practices of that group member that are of concern. The concern will then be escalated to the ClinGen steering committee and the PI that supports that working group or expert panel. And either the DAPC or a designated member of the steering committee will work with the working group or expert panel leadership to determine next steps to address the concern on a case-by-case basis. I think the sort of next steps will really be in response to the nature of the concern and based on sort of the specifics of that situation. So as I said, this policy is now up on the website. We welcome individuals to raise concerns at the email that I listed. And if you have any questions, you can also email us at the dapsy@clinicalgenome.org email address. Happy to answer them. And appreciate the time on today's call just to review this new policy and the work that we've done.
Great, thank you so much, Jules. Does anyone have any quick questions for Jules? All right, well, thanks so much for reviewing that with us today, Jules. So we will move on now to the next presentation. So Deb Ritter is going to introduce this presentation. So this is moving on to our next series of talks on accessing and using ClinGen data. So thanks so much, Deb.
Great. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So I just wanted to introduce using the E-repo API and some data analysis, evidence code analysis that we did through a ClinGen internship this past summer. So we had Faith Pena as our intern, and I was the project manager, and then Dr. Plan and Dr. Wayne Roos were the PI mentors. So this is kind of in two parts. I'm just going to give a little brief introduction to what we did, kind of an overview, and then I'm actually going to play Faith's a video of a presentation that Faith did in August, kind of summarizing her work with this. So this internship was through the Saturday Morning Science program at BCM, and Faith wanted to explore programming and coding and apply that to curation data. So we obtained command lines to access the evidence repository via the API. I will note that most of this data can also be downloaded. So you could download it in a tab delimited format, but for instance, if you wanted to regularly query and get this data, it might be a little more convenient to automate that instead of going to the ERepo website and downloading a flat file each time. So we created scripts to process and transform the ERepo data, and we identified online platforms for further data analysis. So we're also finalizing an educational slide deck so that anyone interested could replicate this analysis as well. And the analysis was done on 5 hereditary cancer VSEPs with data in the ERepo. So just to say, here's the ERepo, and then here is there's a tab button here to go view the API documentations. There's also this download button to download all of the ERepo data as well in a text file. So this is just an example command here. So this is one of the commands that we ran to get all of the myeloid malignancy entries from the ERepo. And then again, this is a link here to the API, further API documentation. And then this was a link to some query examples that Neethu put together as well that we found really helpful. And again, all of this will be included in a slide deck that we will post as well. So for the project then, we had a lot of questions about code use, and I'd say this is about halfway through. So which codes do the VSEPs use the most? What combinations of codes? Are there certain combinations that are more common than others? Are VSEPs, biocurators, and coordinators aware of what codes they rely on the most to get to benign or to get to pathogenic? And if this could help inform them in revisions or in curation. Then again, focusing on some automation here, recently we used this to also automate identification of code clashes or incorrect use or discouraged combinations, I should say as well. And we really focused here on developing the workflows and programs and scripts that help VSEPs do this analysis. So our next steps again are to post this educational slide deck, and that is in process. We're kind of finalizing some of that material. And then also to learn from biocurators and other coordinators as to what types of analysis or visualization would be helpful with this. So I will go ahead now and play. I think I'm gonna have to stop screen sharing and then share again. This sound optimized for video. All right, now I will play Faith's presentation. There. And if there's any issues in the sound, just please stop me and let me know.
Great, thanks, Deb.
Hi, everyone. My name is Faith Pena, and I am currently an undergraduate student at Yale University, and I am interning with ClinGen through the Saturday Morning Science program at Baylor College of Medicine. Today, I will be discussing my analysis of applied evidence codes and hereditary cancer variant curation expert panels. To begin analyzing the use of applied evidence codes within the hereditary cancer VSEPs, we utilized a ClinGen resource called the Evidence Repository. The Evidence Repository is an FDA-recognized human genetic variant database containing expert-curated assertions regarding variants pathogenicity and supporting evidence summaries. The variant curation results are also deposited into ClinVar for community access. Therefore, we use the Evidence Repository API to retrieve data about curated variants. We then extracted the evidence codes to analyze them. And then from that extracted evidence codes, we were actually able to take this project in multiple directions. So first we sorted the evidence codes, ran descriptive statistics such as maximum, finding the maximum, and then analyzing the data. In another direction, we used the evidence codes that we extracted and transformed it into a binary matrix where we could then recognize patterns. And there are also various types of analysis available for this, but we didn't actually perform the analysis for that direction of the project. This project gave me the opportunity to learn several computational strategies, which we used to sort the applied evidence codes. These strategies included accessing the E-repo API through command lines, sorting the API files for each VSUP using Unix in terminal. Some of these commands included sort and unique. We also used tabs to table to view files and other command line processing and proscripting. Here I have an example of the evidence codes we sorted for hereditary breast, ovarian, and pancreatic cancer. And these are just the single codes used. So this is what it would look like using the computational strategies. Here I have tables that show us the maximum, the most used single evidence codes, as well as the most used evidence code combinations for CDH1. We can see that PM2 is the most used single evidence code, and therefore it's an important code for the CDH1 VSUP in general. We can also see for the myeloid malignancy, we have the same tables. And we can see that the myeloid malignancy VSUP uses benign codes as their most used evidence codes, which is interesting. And they also use the BA1 evidence code, which is the standalone for benign, in combination with BP2 for their most used evidence code combination. In the other direction, we transformed the evidence codes to the binary matrix. And this was important for us because just using the sorting, we couldn't necessarily see if the combinations were also using maybe just 2 of the evidence codes instead of maybe all 3. So you wouldn't get that match just by sorting them. But here we can see that what each combination is using and each code that they're using, and it's labeled in such a way that we can visualize it. So this is an example of the evidence code to binary matrix for myeloid malignancy. This is what it looks like in terminal, and then this is what it would look like visualized using Excel. And you can begin to see some of those patterns where you can see the ones. And then if we zoom out, you can see even more of the patterns, and you can see which ones are used the most within a VSUP. And just by looking at it in Excel, we can begin to visualize the patterns. And then we can see which codes are used the most within all the evidence code combinations for each VSUP. And from this, there are several types of analysis available that we could do, but again, we didn't do it. So a possible analysis of the binary matrices would be principal component analysis. And here I have an example that we did in ClusViz for myeloid malignancy. ClusViz also has a heat map available to do a different type of analysis, but here we can see that it's clustered over here, and then some of them are not, and that would draw us to specific conclusions. So in summary, we use the evidence repository to retrieve data. We use programming to sort evidence code data, analyze that data using descriptive statistics, and then we transformed evidence codes to a binary matrix and identified easily accessed online analysis tools. In the bigger picture, the analysis of the evidence codes is very useful to the VSUPs because it helps them to see which codes they're using the most, which isn't something that you might, or that VSUPs might be thinking of already, but it would actually help the development of ACNG guidance and could hopefully help automate the curation process in the future if we use the types of analysis that I discussed. And I'd like to acknowledge the Plan Lab, my mentor, Dr. Sharon Plan, the Plan Lab members, ClinGen, and our collaborators for their support throughout this project. I'd also like to thank the Summer Research Program and funding sources for this professional opportunity.
Great. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Deb, and thanks to Faith as well for that great work. Yeah, I can see how that'd be really helpful for VSEPs as Faith was reviewing there, especially if you're writing your paper for the VSEP as well, like just thinking about the particular codes that you're using. So thank you for sharing, Deb. I think in the interest of time, we'll maybe move on and we can save questions till the end, if that sounds good.
That sounds good.
Great, thanks, Deb. So our next presenter is Ingrid Keseler, who is a biocuration scientist at Stanford University. And Ingrid is going to be sharing her work on the GCI API. So Ingrid, I think we should be able to share your screen.
Ingrid, you may be on mute.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Ingrid. Are you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. I was not on mute, but it was using the wrong microphone.
Oh, okay.
So I'll be talking about the API to the gene curation interface, which is actually not a public API because it allows us to share unpublished information. So we cannot make the API completely public. But I will just show you the help documentation, which is accessible via the help menu here, and you click on it. It's under the help VCI GCI section. And so there you see I need to move this. I can't see it. So there is a long list of help documentation available here. And towards the bottom of the GCI help section, you will see the GCI API help section. And here we'll show you what kinds of documentation, what kinds of output is available. And currently we support 3 different outputs. They are listed here: the affiliations list, the GCI summary report, and the GCI provenance report. For all of these, for all the documentation following here, you will need 2 things that we will need to supply to you. One is the API key, and one is the correct URL. So you will need to replace these API key and URLs with the information that we will be able to provide you to be able to access this API. So the affiliations list is returning the information about the full list of affiliations that are within the GCI VCI. And the output is normally in a JSON format. And here is listed just what is in the output with examples. And following that is how to use the API. So you need to replace these variables here with the variables, the proper keys that we will provide to you. And you will need to name an output file. So when you get the API key and the URL, you just replace these in this example here. And you will need to use, what I forgot to mention, you will need to use the command line in a terminal window on your computer to be able, and just paste this in there. And you will get the output in JSON format. The second report you will be able to get is the GCI summary report. which is essentially all the GDM records for a specific affiliation. So it's per affiliation, and you will need the ID for the affiliation. And if you don't have the ID, you can get it. Actually, it's one of the outputs from the affiliations list. So for a particular GCEP, the ID is, for example, 40007. And you can get this output in both a JSON or a comma separate value format. And you will get basically the list of GDMs starting with the gene, the particular gene, and the sort of an overview of a summary of the GDM record. And following that is again instructions on how to use the API. For this particular report, you will need to enter a time window during which the GDM was published or approved. And depending on whether you input the published or the status approved before, the dates will apply to either the published or the approved dates. And again, this in particular is, you can also output a count of the GDMs that are in this particular time frame by just appending the -d count here. That will just print the count in the terminal window. So something I should have mentioned earlier is there's a time limitation for these outputs. So the API limits the amount of time that it spends on getting the output. So if your output is too large, it will time out. And if you run into timeout issues, you might want to check first what the number is that you're trying to report. And if it is too large, then you might want to restrict the time frame for which you are trying to get the output. The same applies for the proband report. The probands are again for GDMs in a particular time frame for a particular affiliation. So the input is the affiliation you need and a time frame, and it will return again. Oh, here. This is the return data that you'll get for each program for each GDM that is published for a particular time frame for a particular affiliation. And again, there is information on the input that you need. And again, you can query for the number of the curations before you put in the time frame, so you can have a sense of why something might time out. And in order, you should contact us or contact your, that's at the beginning. So you can contact the GCEP coordinator, or you can contact us to receive an API key. If you're not a coordinator, you should contact the coordinator, because we will not provide an API key without your coordinator's approval. So it will have to be facilitated through them. I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. Yeah, this looks like it could be really helpful, again, for GCEPs who are thinking about publishing their data, or really just are thinking about scoring and so on. So thank you so much for all of your work on that. Again, I think we'll maybe move on to the next talk, and then we can hold questions to the end, if that sounds good. So our next presenter is Phil Weller, who's a software developer at Geisinger and also a member of the Data Platform Working Group. So thanks so much, Phil, for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to kind of take you on a whirlwind tour here a little bit, so we can fit as much as we can in a half hour. If there's areas that we want to dive into more details or something, I'm welcome to I welcome coming back at a subsequent meeting. But really, I'm going to discuss how to get data out of the website, either for your, any documents that you're creating or any presentations, or for ingestion into other applications you might have. So we're going to start first with the ClinGen website. Obviously, everybody has seen and has probably worked with the main search bar. The main search bar allows you to do searches based on, gene names, IDs, omen IDs, ensemble IDs. You can really put almost anything you're used to in there, and it'll try to interpret it and respond with something. Or you could click on the little drop-down arrow and select diseases, drugs, or the genomic coordinate regions for GRCH 37 or 38, or website content. And by website content, which is the last item on the menu, it really means that, basically anything else that's on here. So if you want to know about a particular GCEP or a VCEP, you could select that item, type in that VCEP name, and it'll display all the information it can that the website knows about for the VCEP. The problem for the curation data on the main search bar is that it basically only gives you a list of things, and it tells you it's been curated or not. So for example, if we switch over a live one here, and I go to a GRCH 37, and I put in a coordinate range, I'll get a list of genes that occur or overlap within that range, and you can see where the curation is. But that's pretty much it. Not a terribly useful thing unless you're interested in everything that lies within a particular range and don't want to know all the details. So if you're looking for actual curation data, the best place to go to start off with is the downloads page. Now, one of the idiosyncrasies of the website is that the downloads navigation link could be in two different places. So if you're on the main website, it's actually going to be under the more menu. So you click on more and then you go down to the bottom and you'll see the file downloads. If you're on one of the curation pages, it'll have its own link. That's something we want to fix, but right now that exists. That's how it exists. Let's see, on the downloads page, you'll see detailed information on the various activities along with a one big huge summary report. Most of the reports that you can download are actually created, dynamically. So when you click on the button, it'll go off and create the report and give it to you. The one that's different is dosage, and I'll address that in a little bit in a second. But as you can see, if we clicked on, one of those links, we jumped down. In this particular case, for this example, it was the clinical actionability downloads. And it provided us links to a bunch of their reports available in TSV format. Some of them are in JSON. Each of the little links on there will tell you, what format it is and give a description of the data that's provided in it. So again, most of this is dynamic. It'll basically tell you exactly what you're seeing on the website at this particular time. The biggest change is dosage. For historical reasons, that's generated nightly. So it might not have, if there was anything that was published, since the nightly update, it might not be available in that report. We're doing work now to also make that more dynamic, but you probably won't see that until Q1 of next year. Another way to get data out of the website, which is much more custom driven, is the listing table. So in this particular example, we're looking at the dosage sensitivity listing table. But anytime you have a listing table, so validity or the one we just looked at, which was a list of the genes and everything, all of those have basically the same functionality. In that kind of upper rightish corner there, you'll see a toolbar. And one of the toolbars, or one of the entries on the toolbar to the far right, is the export. So keep in mind, this is kind of a what you see is what you get. So what you're looking at on the table is what will get exported. And you can export that in pretty much any format you want, from JSON down to Excel format, and even SQL if you want to import it into another database. The funny part is, though, that you may not want, if you wanted all of it, then you might as well just have downloaded the file right from the downloads page. So the beauty of this is that you can customize this data listing here for your, to get exactly what you want. So you can use, the search entry to sit there and say, I only want something that has, dosage sensitivity unlikely for an HI score. So you could just type in dosage sensitivity unlikely here, and you'll get everything for the HI and the TS scores where that happens to have a rating. You can also knock out certain columns. Let's see. Yeah, I do have slides for these things. So you can knock out a column. So you go to the button that's kind of like a checkerboard pattern or so, and you can unclick columns that you really don't want viewed, or more importantly, exported. So if you remove a column, it won't show up on a screen, which means when you export it, it won't get exported out. And of course, if you want everything, you can click on the toggle all button. By default, most of the listings pages in the ClinGen website probably have, one or more hidden columns. These are ones that, people might not just want to look at every single day. Like maybe the cytoband is just redundant if you already have the genomic coordinates, it'll be a link, but you might want them in a report. So it's always a good idea to go into that checkerboard and see, are there any additional columns that you can display to get, to get more data out that you're interested. Dosage sensitivity, because it's the one place on the ClinGen website where it includes both regions and genes. You can also click on these green buttons up there that says genes on and regions on. You can click on one of them to actually hide regions or hide genes if you don't care about one or the other there. We talked a little bit about searching and sorting. The only thing you really have to worry about and be concerned here is, and keep in mind, is that the main table search bar is universal for the whole bar. So if you type in, HGNC12, it's going to look in every column and every field there to see if that string exists and display it. So you can't really say something like, show me all the genes that's in the X chromosome there, because if you type in X, you'll probably pick up, gene names that say X and everything like that. But what you can do is you can trigger a column search also. So if you click on the button here, that's the little search or spyglass there, that'll actually grow out the header to include items that you can put into that will only search that specific column. So in this case, we only wanted to look for sufficient evidence for the HI score, not for also the TS score. So we could go back and we could select that item in addition to any of the other searches that we do. So again, all this comes down to various tools to refine what you're viewing. And then once you got, as close to what you want as possible, you can use the export button to throw it out in a spreadsheet and maybe refine it there if you want. The ClinGen dashboard, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is one of these that you may have seen in another presentation, or I probably should come back and do give it more time than we've got available right now. But basically, the whole idea of the ClinGen dashboard is that you can follow genes or genes within regions. So if you are concerned about one or more certain set of genes, and you looked at the data and you say, okay, now I don't want to keep coming back every day to see if it's changed. What you can do is you can get an account, which you can set up yourself and log into the ClinGen dashboard and tell it what genes you want to follow. And then the system will automatically tell you when something is modified. So in order to create an account, it's a shame that's kind of blurred out a little bit on the slide. I apologize for that. But And the very upper right-hand part of the website, you'll see a login button. You can click on that and it'll bring up this pop-up here, and then you can click on the register here and create your own account. And once you have an account, you can log in then to the dashboard. And if you're already on the website, you can just click on the little thing that says dashboard and it'll take you there. And then you can come here and say, okay, I want to follow Jeannie. You just click on, follow new Jean. You type in a Jean name, and at that point, it's then followed. Now you can control the frequency. You can follow an entire activity. You can even follow by a GCEP or a VCEP, which might be particularly attractive to you all. So these are a lot of little details and everything that, like I said, is almost a half-hour presentation on its own. We'll just kind of blur through them a little bit, but I think it's important that you know that you do have a whole bunch of flexibility here in what you can actually follow. And the system will notify you, basically nightly if you keep it daily notifications. But if that's too much, you can also do weekly notifications, monthly. You can even set a summary. So you can basically say, I don't really care. I just want to know, once a month, tell me everything that's changed for all these things I'm interested. And you'll basically then get a summary report at the, at the time and date that you want. Let me go back here. I wish I had a pop-up of the GCEP VCEP, since that would have been a little more applicable. But if we have time at the end, we'll actually quick log in and I can show you. Okay, so clinical actionability data is a little bit different in getting. So validity data you can get pretty much easily right from the website. Dosage sensitivity you can. When you get to the variant pathogenicity, your best bet is to follow directions that were provided in the previous presentation from the E-repo. Clinical actionability, if you actually, it's a separate website on its own that we link to. So if you go to there, you'll actually see what you're probably used to if you're interested in actionability. You'll see the actionability listing for adults and peds. From here, if you click on the filters and the exports and the APIs, you can do something similar to what we're doing on the other things on the website. You can limit what you're viewing, and then you can click on the export or the API button, actually send it out, in a specific format. You can also query externally if from a program you need the information rather than interactively. You can query it through different strings. So I've given two examples here that we're using actually to pull information into the website. The only difference between this first one, this gets a bunch of summary information. The only difference between adult and pediatrics is this little part right here. If you want it pediatric, you just change that to pediatric. The next one shows much more assertion data than the first one. And again, if you wanted adult instead of pediatric, you could change to adult. So I'm giving you these as kind of a starting point, but really the actionability team, if you have very specific questions, is the place to go. And my last slide has a contact information on where to find out more on actionability. I will admit right off the bat that we don't make it cohesively easy, to get data. It's not all coherent and intuitive and everything. It's something we're aware of. The first goal for us was to get much more data on a website that you might have, ever seen in the past, 2 years or so. And then the next goal that umbrellas under something we call advanced search is to actually give you a common user interface to get all that data. So bear with us for another couple months or so after the holidays and then in the new year, and hopefully we'll be able to give you a somewhat belated Christmas present. GenCC is another application independent of the ClinGen website that holds a lot of data from a lot of sources, including some data from the ClinGen itself. GenCC is like for all practical purposes, it's part of ClinGen, but in itself, it's kind of a separate entity. Its goal is to be the gene equivalent of ClinVar, and you could see it's got a lot of, a fair amount of genes for only been out there for not even a year in the public, and it's got a ton of curations. If you want to check it out, you can go to search.thegencc.org, but don't type it just like this because there's only one colon there. Always embarrassing to find typos when you're actually doing a presentation. From here, you can kind of navigate to trim down the screen by typing in, alpha strings for the gene or for the disease to filter down what you want. We get information from a number of places, so you can even filter down by submissions. But the real thing, if you want to just bulk download the whole thing, is to go to the download link that's up there on the navigation bar. And that'll take you to a page that allows you to download all the submission data in a variety of formats, including Excels and also TSVs and CSVs. Again, I've got contact information for GenCC if you want to get more information, or if you would like us to come back and give more of a updated presentation on GenCC. I think Marina and I would be more than happy to oblige that. DVD genes is something that you might not have been exposed to at all, but it's another source of information. Now, full disclosure here, this is a Geisinger product. It is not fully a part of ClinGen proper. However, ClinGen data is shared with it, and we're always looking at seeing if we can share other different information back. So, but I don't want to pretend to know the kind of data that you're interested in and looking for, or what might be useful or not. So, since this presentation is kind of the same one that we gave at the beginning of the year in another group, I wanted to also share this information with you. The website for DVD genes is dvd.geisingeradmi.org, and it has a whole slew of things that are strictly associated with developmental brain disorders, and you can see the neurological disorders that are particular to there. You'll see it also has kind of the same look and feel of the ClinGen website, and that's because the same people who developed the ClinGen website also work on this product. So if you're familiar with navigating around the ClinGen website, you'll have no problem navigating around this particular site. One of the things that DVD genes does is they tier all their data, kind of the same way that the other ClinGen activity score stuff, except they work at this on a gene level as opposed to scoring a gene disease assertion. And they tell you which genes are, high candidate genes for particular disorders or not. This is the lower part of the website, which displays all the loss of function genes that have been categorized as having loss of function variants. And normally you can view the disorders, but if you click on a view classification button here, you'll also see what the classifications are associated with that gene for a lot of other stuff. This is not something that we do very well in ClinGen yet. We want to pull some of this back. We have over the past year or so added some gradually, but we want to add some more. But you can see that both the ClinGen and the GenCC classifications are interested. So if you care about Safari or DDG2P, and you just want to quick check this as a correlating stuff, you can. And then you can go over to the downloads page, which I don't really show here, but you can go to that downloads icon and click on that. And then download the bigger reports in CSV format. Okay, so a little bit of future work that I wanted to share with you all, in particular on the ClinGen website. Talk a little bit more about advanced search. and even more about the gene disease validity evidence data. So these are things that are not rolled out quite yet. They're still being worked on. We were hoping to get them out in Q4, but in all honesty, I think we're running a little bit behind here. We're probably looking at next year for some of this. The whole idea of advanced search is to make to introduce a facility that allows you to search across all the website attributes. So basically all the data. So right now, you can't sit there and say something like, I want all the genes that have published curations from this particular expert panel, or even, harder, I want all of them that are published from multiple expert panels, including some specific ones. You can't basically search across activities. You have to kind of dig and mind yourself and, take notes and try to find the correlations you're looking for. And that's very time consuming and doesn't give you a nice, neat report that you might want. So we're going to change that. We're going to make it so that you can, enter in either via a, kind of logical, textual, easy to use and learn string, or by visually saying, add this attribute, add this attribute, add this attribute. We're going to give you a mechanism to do those queries. So you can basically say, things that, like the first one, I want, show me all the genes curated by dosage, comma, missed the comma there, missed all the commas there, actionability and pharma that has a PLI of greater than 0.5, and it would list out those items for you. And then, of course, even though this mockup doesn't show it, we would use the same table format you're used to on the other listings, which means you could, add columns, remove columns, whatever, and then export the format. So once again, this is something being worked on. It's not currently available, but we've been doing work on this for a good chunk of the year now, and looking really forward to coming back here and being able to walk you through the actual details of this feature. Next thing is gene disease validity data. So as you all are used to, probably, let me bounce over. Oh, I kind of let the cat out of the bag there. Shame on me. So we're going to go to ERBB4. And let's say you want to look at this and you click on here. This is what you would normally see, which is basically summary data. So not a whole lot of detail, and more importantly, not a lot of ways to export that detail. Now the GCI is just giving you insight into their new API, which would allow you to get that information out of their application. But if you don't have a GCI account or such, that might be difficult to get to. Or if you just want to look at the data, the API might not give it to you in a nice, neat visual form that you want or so. So we have been working very close with the GCI folks to provide evidence data visually, pretty much for you folks that have GCI curator accounts that you can log and see the evidence details. It's pretty much the same format and such as that. And I happen to have a live thing here, which I probably should have hidden back, but just to show you that this actually works, I'll go through the same sequence here, click on there, and you can see we don't just have the summary now, but we've got all the evidence tabs and everything like that. So the summary is still pretty much what you're used to. But if you want to see the genetic evidence details, you can click over to here and see all the individual information. This is still something we're putting fine. We're still working on cleaning this up and addressing some of the final issues on here. But this is pretty stable enough to do for a demo. So I really wanted to include that in here because as you notice, there's our nice little toolbar. So if you sit there and say, gee, I really don't care about, some of this program data, you can knock that out, and then you can go and do the export. And then you can, you'll have data in a format that, you can use, especially if you want a PDF thing, you can export it as PDF and then drop it right into your documents. Let me just add these in here. You can do a lot of searching and sorting from here. You can search the entire table. There's actually a little bit of an advanced search capability here where you can, and again, we're still working on this, but the ideal here is to give you a rather simplistic version of what we're planning for the advanced search on the ClinGen on the main search bar, which is allow you to specify a term and then press on a button and then put other terms and everything. So kind of give you a more advanced way of doing the searching and sorting there. We also give you a couple little quick hints. So for example, the total varied points for, the genetic evidence, will show that right on the toolbar. Same on the segregation, will show other points. We separate out segregation and case control, but if there are none, and that's what the little X means here, that there were none for that particular item, we won't, there's nothing to really click on and show. But you can go over here and see things and deal with stuff, the experimental evidence, if you want to look at that. Again, you can click on it. We give all the same information you might have seen within the GCI and give the ability to export and everything. Same for non-storable evidence, including links right over to the PEBMED document, which we kindly launched for in a different tab. So you're not going back and forth 100 times. All the references for that particular item. And we also include the lumping and splitting here. Now I know that that's also available to you from the gene page, but while you're bouncing back and forth here, it seemed like, giving you a shortcut to be able to see that data is, would be appropriate rather than having to force you back to the gene page and then keep going back and forth on redraws. The one thing that won't appear on the production release is this little link here. That's just an easy way for us to verify that the data we're displaying is consistent with the GCI. So this product is a bit overdue. If you were around in the beginning of the year, I think we forecasted this as a Q1 release, and here we are, getting dangerously close to Q4. And we're not quite there yet. It's been a little bit of a work to verify the data and get corrections back and get everything done. But it was work well spent because we wanted to make sure that you could trust the data that you're showing. So we're shooting for a Q4 release on this one. So you can bear with us for, another couple months or so. Hope to have that. And again, if we want to go into this in more detail, happy to come back and do a different presentation there. So let me throw this slide up here because this contains contact information, and I can send this whole PDF thing to Deb for distribution to everybody, so you have that. But for anything related to ClinGen or GenCC, you can contact Marina or myself. For DVD genes, I listed Hermela, who's the equivalent of the stakeholder in that environment. Over at Geisinger, you could also contact myself. And for clinical actionability, Charisma Jenkins is the go-to person for everything there. So let me stop here, and I've left you, a whopping 4 minutes for questions.
That was great. Thanks so much, Phil. And I mean, it's amazing to see the functionality of the website and then what's to come as well. So just really appreciate everyone's work on that. There is a question in the chat from Dimitri. As far as I understand, GenCC and ClinGen curators are working on adding molecular mechanisms of pathogenicity, such as loss of function and gain of function. Is it known when such information may become available through the ClinGen website? I don't know if that's a question for you, or I see Marina's on the call as well.
I from a display on the ClinGen website, I'll say that I have not heard this, so I suspect that we're still in a data acquisition mode on these things and not ready to have it available for display. I think the best thing we can do on this one is get back to you with additional information, since this is not a question that I can answer.
Yeah, Phil's exactly right. We're actually still working on standardizing procedures to collect and capture this information. As soon as we do, we'll be checking in with the software folks.
Great, thanks to both. So are there any other questions for any of our presenters today? We have a few minutes left. Just to make sure that everyone saw the question in the chat from Deb, which was a question for Ingrid as to whether the GCI API could post data to the GCI, or is it only to get data out? And so Ingrid had responded, it's just to get data out of the GCI.